Welcome to our first virtual Read Aloud. Thank you to all our school and local community members for participating and sharing their inspirational and meaningful readings. Also, thank you to Dana DeVita and Carol Dugan for arranging this event every year. Sit back and relax and enjoy 11 different readings. We hope you enjoy our first virtual Read Aloud.
Hey Barr Golden Knights, I'm going to be reading for you today a great little book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. This is a story for people who follow their dreams and make their own rules. A story that has inspired people for decades. For most seagulls, life consists simply of eating and surviving. Flying is just a means of finding food. However, Jonathan Livingston Seagull is no ordinary bird. For him, flying is life itself. Against the conventions of seagull society, he seeks to find a higher purpose and become the best at doing what he loves. This is a fable about the importance of making the most of our lives, even if our goals run contrary to the norms of our flock, tribe, or neighborhood. Through the metaphor of flight, Jonathan's story shows us that if we follow our dreams, we too can soar. It was morning, and the new sun sparkled gold across the ripples of a gentle sea. A mile from shore, a fishing boat chummed the water, and the word for breakfast flock flashed through the air, till a crowd of 1,000 seagulls came to dodge and fight for bits of food. It was another busy day beginning. But way off alone, out by himself, beyond the boat and shore, Jonathan Livingston Seagull was practicing. 100 feet in the sky, he lowered his webbed feet, lifted his beak, and strained a hold, a painful, hard, twisting curve through his wings. The curve meant that he would fly slowly, and now he slowed until the wind was a whisper in his face, until the ocean stood still beneath him. He narrowed his eyes in fierce concentration, held his breath, forced one single more inch of curve, then his feathers ruffled, he stalled and fell. Seagulls, as you know, never falter, never stall. To stall in the air is for them disgrace, and it is dishonor. But Jonathan Livingston Seagull, unashamed, stretching his wings again in that trembling hard curve, slowing, and stalling once more, was no ordinary bird.
So this is Supervisor George Hoehmann, and I'm happy to be reading a book. This book was actually done by an author of mine that favorite author for children's books, Patricia Polacco. And Patricia Polacco really writes books with a lot of meaning, a lot of feeling. There's always a moral to the story, and she often writes about teachers that were important to her or important to people within her family. It happens to be that Patricia Polacco was somebody that had a learning disability. She overcame it, and she's written well over 30 children's books and been quite successful. So I love reading her books. This is about Mr. Wayne's masterpiece, and it's really a wonderful story. I'm reading this book for the MacArthur Barr, Read Aloud Day, and unfortunately we can't be there in person. And we're also having a copy of this that we're going to share with the Parks and Recreation Department that can be used going forward as well. So without further ado, Mr. Wayne's Masterpiece by Patricia Polacco. My worst nightmare had come true when, after a few days of school, Mr. Tranchina asked me to read my essay out loud. I love to write, but getting up and reading my essay in front of everybody, I just couldn't do it. No way. But when he called on me, I had to do it. I turned around, gripping the paper so tightly that it fluttered like a bird in flight. My knees were knocking and my mouth was so dry I couldn't move my lower jaw. I was sure that the kids in the back could hear my heart beating. I looked up. Everybody was looking at me. Everybody. "Take a deep breath, dear," Mr. T said from the front of the room. Everyone here is your friend. We really want to hear your essay." But my voice wouldn't come out. Finally, Mr. T let me go back to my seat. "It's all right, Patricia," he said. "I just wanted to die." Later that day, Mr. T said he had someone he wanted to meet. It turned out to be Mr. Wayne, the drama teacher. "The drama teacher? Mr. T tells me that you're a crackerjack writer," Mr. Wayne said. He had the most wonderful smile. "I like to write," I admitted. "And he tells me that you have a problem getting up speaking in front of the class." I just looked down at the floor. "Well, just maybe we can get you past that," he said, grinning and turning me toward a group of kids painting something on the floor. "Our class is working on a winter play." My heart stopped in my chest. Drama class? Winter play? Me? Was he kidding? Did he really think I could ever get up on a stage in front of people? Maybe hundreds of people? After supper, Mom and I were sitting in our favorite chair together. She was a teacher now, but my uncle said when she was in college, she was the best actress ever. Everyone thought she would end up in Hollywood. When I told her that Mr. T had got me into drama class, she was so pleased. "Oh, Tricia, you're going to just love it. It will bring you out of your shyness. You'll be better than I ever was," she cooed. I didn't have the heart to tell her that I hated getting up in front of people and speaking, that when I did, I felt like I couldn't breathe, and that I knew I'd fail. All I said was, "I'll never be able to speak in front of people, Mom. Never, ever, ever." My mother thought for a time, then she kissed me. "Please try, Trish. It will bring you joy to your life that you can't even imagine." I knew for once that my mother was totally wrong. At first, Mr. Wayne put me in charge of painting the scenery flats for the play. Someone had told him that I loved art. Most everyone else in the class was working on the play itself. It was called Musette in the Snow Garden, about a girl and her friends who disappear from this mysterious garden. Something like a Peter Pan. Mr. Wayne had written it. He joked that it was his masterpiece. After a time, I became more and more fascinated listening to the cast rehearse for the play. I found myself mouthing the words as I painted and helped build all the sets. Before long, I knew everyone's part, but no one knew. Mr. Wayne often invited me to join the rest of the class in exercises. He'd bark an emotion at us, and he would immediately show that emotion: fear, anger, curiosity. He had us do word games, too, and had our voices just make noise. Roar, harumph. Sometimes he'd tell us all to lie on the floor and put heavy books on our stomachs and make us recite poems. "If these books aren't moving, then you are not using your diaphragms," he'd say. I was really beginning to love this class. One day, after I'd been in the class for a few weeks, Mr. Wayne announced who was taking each part of the play. Kathleen Burns would be Musette, the lead. I liked Kathleen, so did everyone else in the school. It seemed she was a nice person, and what an actress. No wonder Mr. Wayne had chosen her. Finally, one day, as I was finishing up a scenery flat, Mr. Wayne gathered the cast on stage. "You all should have memorized your parts by now. Remember, on the night of the performance, there will be no one but each of you on the stage. You'll have to know your lines by heart." "Yes," they all shouted, but they didn't. Bobby Eklund kept forgetting the last part of anything he had to say. Carol Costa spoke so low, who knew if she even knew her part? I could see Mr. Wayne was growing frustrated. Then Kathleen Burns, Musette, could hardly remember a single line. "Come to the garden at the winter moon, because this is when the magic chair will appear," I blurted out. What was I thinking? But Mr. Wayne didn't seem to mind, so every time someone forgot a word or a phrase, I shouted it out. Patricia, Mr. Wayne finally said, "Do you know this entire play by heart?" I had to think for a moment. "Well, I guess I do," I answered. "Absolutely splendid," he said as he smiled. "You must become our prompter." Yes, I nodded. I could do that, as long as I didn't have to get on the stage and speak in front of people. Then, just a week before the play, a catastrophe struck. Kathleen Burns' family suddenly moved away. They were just plain gone, without even telling the school. "What are we going to do?" Carol Costa howled at rehearsal. "None of us knows her part well enough to step in for her." Donna Biscay said to Mr. Wayne, "Wait," Kathy Polos called out. Mr. Wayne, we have Musette. She's been here all along." And she motioned towards me. "Patricia knows every single word of the play." Well, yes, I did, and my mother would be so proud, but when I looked out into the empty auditorium and tried to say a line, nothing, and I mean nothing, would come out. I felt like I had gulped handfuls of dust and sand. Finally, all I could manage to get out was a shaky, "No, Mr. Wayne, not me." Everyone surrounded me. "Patricia, you have to do it. You just have to," they said. "Oh, please do it, please," Mike Conlon added. Mike Conlon had never spoken to me before. "Well, Patricia, do you think you have it in you to do it?" Mr. Wayne asked. I just stared down at the floor. "She won't do it," Bobby Eklund finally scoffed. "She's afraid. She can't even read her English papers out loud in front of the class." This time, Bobby Eklund was right. I really was afraid. After school that day, Mr. Wayne worked with me alone. "Patricia, everyone in class is behind you, all of them. Will be just as nervous as you are to stand up on that stage. Don't you know that? I want you to recite Musette's speech when she is in the garden at midnight." Then he pulled me out to the apron of the stage. I started to say her lines. I really did not know them all by heart, but I looked out at the empty auditorium and my voice started shaking. "Say each sentence slowly, take a breath between each of them. I noticed you're locking your knees. Don't do that. Relax. Move around the stage. You've heard my directions, so you know them by heart too," Mr. Wayne coaxed. "Patricia, let the play take you." I forgot the audience that wasn't there. I did it exactly as he instructed. I let the play take me. With each sentence, I seemed to gain strength. I didn't know that I had. "That's it, Patricia. You are my Musette," Mr. Wayne said. The night of the play, Mom came backstage and helped all of us girls get into our costumes. I was so excited, but terrified. I couldn't even remember my opening lines. "How many people will come to see the play?" I asked her. "Didn't somebody say it could be over 100 people, over 200? "It doesn't matter, dear Trish. The moment you step on the stage, everything will come to you." 100 people, 200, my heart was pounding really hard and really fast. I could hardly breathe. Carol came up behind me. "You've been perfect in all the rehearsals. You're going to be great," she whispered. But I always rehearsed in front of an empty auditorium. I gulped. Mr. Wayne heard us. "Remember my Musette. Let the play take you." Then he brought me up to the stage and we waited in the wings until it was my entrance. I peeked around the curtain. I could see in the darkness the packed audience, mostly adults, but some children. My mouth was dry and I couldn't feel my legs anymore. I couldn't do this. I just couldn't. But then I heard my cue. "You're on, Musette," Mr. Wayne whispered and gave me a little push. I took a deep breath. I unlocked my knees and swayed a little. "Musette," I said to myself, and again, "Musette," and then I moved out onto the stage. Without thinking, my first line came out of my mouth, and then the second, and then the third. And I moved around center stage to gather my handmaidens, my arms flowing as I called them. I was Musette. And the more I said, the easier it got. The audience just disappeared. I remembered every stage direction that Mr. Wayne had shown me. I gestured, I sang out, I reacted to each of the others. I listened to what they were saying, and I responded. Everyone played their roles too. When Bobby Eklund flubbed a line to me, he looked lost, but it didn't throw me. I just fed him his next line under my breath. I was on fire. The rest of the play went by without a hitch. Everyone did just a great job. And what I loved most was that I felt like I belonged to something so much bigger than I was. All of us in the play were like family. And the audience, it stood up and gave us a standing ovation. I couldn't believe it. After the last curtain call, I found Mr. Wayne. You were right about everything, I gushed. Once I started, I forgot the audience. No butterflies, no stomachache, no shaky legs. I knew exactly what to say. Do you remember that I called my play my masterpiece? I said that I did. Tonight, Patricia, I have another masterpiece. Where is it, Mr. Wayne? Maybe you'd written another play? It's you, Patricia. You showed courage and grace. You stood up to your fears. Tonight, you are my masterpiece. That magical night has lived in my memory all of these many, many years. Of course, Mr. Wayne had many, many other masterpieces. Young people who were just like me, afraid of stepping on stage, and like me, afraid to speak in front of everybody. He molded them into miraculous creatures that, because of his workshops and good ideas and his belief in them, discovered the real power that they had. Thanks to him, I did lose my shyness, and I am able to make speeches to crowds of many hundreds, sometimes even thousands. He taught me to speak from the heart and to believe in myself. But most of all, he taught me that all of us are masterpieces, if only given the chance and encouragement to be one. So that concludes our book. I want to thank all the folks from MacArthur Barr, Dana DeVita and her entire crew and team. Well over 20 years of putting together these read-a-thons, read-alongs, and I very much enjoy it. Hopefully we'll be back there next year. I want to wish everybody a wonderful summer. I hope that the school year concludes well for everybody, and keep on reading, keep on working, and things will be back to normal soon. And for the Parks and Recreation Department, to Elaine and to all of our staff, thanks for all the wonderful work that you do, and thanks for recording this as well, and we'll use it for the Parks and Recreation Department as well. Thanks everybody, God bless.
Welcome, Nanuet Knights. My name is Ann Byrne, and I am president of the Nanuet School Board. The Nanuet School Board is comprised of 7 members, all of whom are elected by the public, and our main function is to set policy for the district in all facets of district life. We also help with the budget, and we hire the superintendent. Today I'm with you to be part of this 25th anniversary of our Read Aloud. And I have to tell you, I'm one of these people who absolutely love to read. I read every single day. And I started my love of reading probably when I was a little bit younger than you are. And to this day, it is one of my true delights. It takes me to places, it lets me meet people, and I love all kinds of literature. But it really doesn't matter what you read. If you're into sports, you should read about your sports heroes and heroines. If you love music or art, if you love comic books, read. Let them take you to places that you might not have gone before. You will see that reading is a true pleasure. And today I'm going to read to you from an author that you've read when you were really young. And that author is Dr. Seuss. And the book I'm going to read to you today is the book that I give to people when they graduate. And it's called Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. And I like this book because it does take you to places that you might not have thought about. So, congratulations. Today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know, and you are the guy who'll decide where to go. You'll look up and down streets, look 'em over with care. About some you will say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not so good street. And you may not find any you want to go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. It's opener there in the wide open air. Out there, things can happen, and frequently do, to people as brainy and footsy as you. And when things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew, just go right along. You'll start happening too. Oh, the places you'll go. You'll be on your way up, you'll be seeing great sights, you'll join the high flyers who soar to great heights. You won't lag behind because you'll have the speed. You'll pass the whole gang and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest. Except when you don't, because sometimes you won't. I'm sorry to say so, but sadly it's true that bang-ups and hang-ups can happen to you. You can get all hung up in a prickly perch and your gang will fly on and you'll be left in a lurch. You'll come down from the lurch with an unpleasant bump, and the chances are them that you'll be in a slump. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done. You will come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? And if you go in, should you turn left or right, or right and 3/4, or maybe not quite? Or go around back and sneak in from behind? Simple it's not, I'm afraid you will find, for a mind maker upper to make up his mind. You can get so confused that you'll start in to race down long wiggled roads at breaknecking pace, and grind on for miles across weirdishly wild space, headed, I fear, toward a most useless place, the waiting place. For people just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. No, that's not for you. Somehow you'll escape all that waiting and staying. You'll find the bright places where boom bands are playing. With banner flip-flapping once more, you'll ride high, ready for anything under the sky, ready because you're that kind of a guy. Oh, the places you'll go. There is fun to be done. There are points to be scored. There are games to be won. And the magical things you can do with that ball will make you the winningest winner of all. Fame. You'll be famous as famous can be, with the whole wide world watching you win on TV. Except when they don't, because sometimes they won't. I'm afraid that sometimes you'll play lonely games too. Games you can't win because you'll play against you. All alone. Whether you like it or not, alone will be something you'll be quite a lot. And when you're alone, there's a very good chance you'll meet things that scare you right out of your pants. There are some down the road between hither and yon that can scare you so much you won't want to go on. But on you will go, though the weather be foul. Oh, on you will go, though your enemies prowl. On you will go, though the hack and cracks howl. Onward up many a frightening creek, though your arms may get sore and your sneakers may leak. On and on you will hike, and I know you'll hike far and face up to your problems, whatever they are. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strayed birds as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact. And remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains. So, be your name Buxbaum or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Alley Van Allen O'Shea, you're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. So get on your way. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a little different from most of the other stories that are being read, but there are places you're going, and putting one foot in front of the other, you will get there with success. I love reading to you, and I hope you all become readers, because it's something that you'll do for the rest of your life, and it's something that you'll enjoy and pass down to your children and to your grandchildren. And thank you very much for listening today. Love you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Donna Linnane and I worked in the Nanuet School District for over 30 years. I'm also a member of the Nanuet West Nyack Rotary Club, and I was very honored to be asked to read to you. So here goes. It's an anonymous story. A guest speaker started off at an assembly holding up a $20 bill. The crowd of 300 students had gathered to hear him, and he asked, who would like this $20 bill? 300 hands went up. He said, I am going to give this $20 bill to one of you, but first let me do this. He crumpled up the $20 bill, and he asked, who still wants it? All 300 hands were still raised. Well, he replied, what if I do this? And he dropped the $20 bill on the ground, stomped on it with his shoes, picked it up, showed it to the crowd. The bill was all crumpled and dirty. Now who still wants it? Again, all hands went up. My friends, I have just shown you a very important lesson. No matter what I did with the money, you still wanted it because it did not decrease in value. It was still worth $20. Many times in our lives, life crumples us, grinds us into the dirt. We make bad decisions or deal with poor circumstances. We may feel worthless. But no matter what has happened or what will happen, you will never lose your value. You are special, and don't ever forget it.
Hello, middle schoolers. It's Dr. Fox. I'm here to read for your Read Aloud for this year. This is our first virtual read aloud, and we're so excited to have you with us. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Remarkables by Margaret Peterson Haddix, part of Chapter 3. Marin knew that their house was at the top of a hill. She knew that their new town was called Summit View, and that the road that led to their neighborhood circled up and up and up, higher and higher. But knowing that was one thing. Looking down on an entire town was something else. It wasn't exactly all easy to see because the house directly behind the woods was in the way. And suddenly Marin wanted to see everything. If only she was a little taller, or... Marin looked up. The tree beside her was a huge maple with thick branches that started right above her head and went up like a ladder. The tree rose so far up into the sky that she couldn't see the top. This was an excellent tree for climbing. Marin reached for the lowest branch and swung and flipped her body around until she could wrap a leg around the branch too. When she was about 20 feet above the ground and hundreds of feet above the main part of her new town, Marin reached a gap in the branches. Now she had a clear view. The town in the valley below looked like a doll village, or maybe one of the scenes her grandfather built for his model railroads. But the sun was in her eyes when she gazed in that direction. It was easier to look down at the houses closest to the edge of the woods, where the glow was more subtle. The roof of the nearest house, right past Marin's toes, almost seemed to shimmer. "Race you," someone called below. "It's too hot for that. I concede. You win," someone else laughingly called back. Marin tightened her grip on the thick center branch of the tree and ducked her head behind a clump of maple leaves. She didn't want anyone seeing her. It would be too hard to explain why she was in the tree, and that she really wasn't spying. But Marin was curious about who was down below. She inched her face ever so slightly to the side, peeking out again past the leaves. A pack of kids had just turned the corner onto the street that stretched out before her, leading up the hill toward the woods. They all looked older than Marin. One of the boys actually had a curly beard shadowing his jawline. Teenagers, Marin decided. These teenagers were coming home from school. Even though Marin had had her last day of school 2 weeks ago back in Illinois, the school year went later here in Pennsylvania. None of the teenagers tilted their heads up towards Marin's tree. She dared to peek out a little more. One of the girls had a hand resting on the shoulder of one of the guys. One of the other girls was braiding another girl's hair even as they walked. One of the boys bounced a basketball back and forth with everyone else, with all the others taking turns. And they all looked happy, Marin thought. No, not just that. They're happy together. The squad of teenagers reached a portion of their street where the pavement turned sharply uphill. It was clear they were used to the dramatic incline because none of them slowed down. One of them, a girl with tangled red curls and a yellow skirt that flowed around her knees like sunbeams, even turned around so she climbed the hill backward while she kept up a conversation with the kids below and behind her. When the group was about halfway up the hill, a battered old car spun around the corner at the bottom of the street. Even more teenagers leaned out the side windows, one of them jokingly taunting. "Oh, did you leave early so you could get snacks ready for us?" "No, we just didn't have to wait in line of the gas-guzzling cars," the red-haired girl retorted. "We were more environmental and healthier, and," she raised her face to the sky, "we got to enjoy the nice weather." The car putted up on the street to the last house, the one closest to Marin's tree. 3 boys and a girl climbed out. The girl and one of the boys began an old-fashioned dance. A waltz, maybe? On the yard while they waited for the walkers to catch up. Was this the beginning of a party? For all Marin knew, maybe high school kids had parties every day after school. Or were they all brothers and sisters? Did every single one of those teenagers live in the same house? Marin decided she had brothers and sisters on her mind just because of having a new brother herself. The 9 teenagers would have had to include multiple sets of twins or triplets to have that many siblings so close in age. It had to be that these teenagers were just a bunch of friends, but Marin kept thinking they acted more like family. Maybe some or all of them were adopted. Maybe they were foster brothers and sisters. Marin blinked, trying to figure it out. And in that one instant, every single one of the 9 teenagers vanished. So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully you guys will pick up this book. Again, I was reading Remarkables by Margaret Peterson Haddix. You have some time at home, pick up a good book, get lost in a good book while we're all stuck at home in this crazy virtual world. We miss you. Stay safe, keep reading, and enjoy all the characters and all the places that your books take you.
I'm going to read The Road Not Taken, a poem that allows the reader to think about choices in life. It is written by poet Robert Frost. If life is a journey, this poem highlights those times in life when a decision has to be made. Which way will you go? The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made the difference.
Good morning. Today I'd like to share with you a book called I Am Peace, a Book of Mindfulness by Susan Verde. And I wanted to share this with you because it's a good reminder to all of us that being mindful is staying fully present in the moment and how we can help ourselves, especially in these times that are challenging and are different, and we're feeling a full range of different emotions. I Am Peace, a Book of Mindfulness by Susan Verde. I am peace. There are times when I worry about what might happen next and what happened before. The thoughts in my head are like rushing water, and I feel like a boat with no anchor, being carried away. I give myself a moment. I take a breath, and then I tell myself, it's all right. I feel the ground beneath my feet and steady myself. And start to notice the here and the now. My thoughts begin to settle. My mind begins to clear. I am peace. I can watch my worries gently pop up and disappear. I let things go. I can say what I feel inside, out loud. I know myself. I can share kindness with others. I make a difference. I can hug a tree and thank it for its beauty and strength. I connect to nature. I can watch the clouds make shapes against the sky. I know wonder. I can taste and smell and touch and hear and see what is all around me. I use my senses. I can feel my breath fill my whole body. I tune into me. Now the water is still. I have found my anchor, and everything is all right. I don't need to worry about before or after. I am in this moment. I am peace. Now I share my peace with others and hope that it is carried away to those who need it. And I dream. We are peace. So allow yourself a moment. Take a breath and tell yourself, it's all right. You are peace. I Am Peace, a book of mindfulness by Susan Verde.
The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. Chapter 1. Once in a house on Egypt Street, there lived a rabbit who was made almost entirely of china. He had china arms and china legs, china paws and a china head, a china torso and a china nose. His arms and legs were jointed and joined by wire so that his china elbows and china knees could be bent, giving him much freedom of movement. His ears were made of real rabbit fur, and beneath the fur there were strong bendable wires which allowed the ears to be arranged in poses that reflected the rabbit's mood, jaunty, tired, full of ennui. His tail, too, was made of real rabbit fur and was fluffy and soft and well-shaped. The rabbit's name was Edward Tulane, and he was tall. He measured almost 3 feet from the tip of his ears to the tip of his feet. His eyes were painted a penetrating and intelligent blue. In all, Edward Tulane felt himself to be an exceptional specimen. Only his whiskers gave him pause. They were long and elegant, as they should be, but they were of uncertain origin. Edward felt quite strongly that they were not the whiskers of a rabbit. Whom the whiskers had belonged to initially, what unsavory animal, was a question that Edward could not bear to consider for too long. And so he did not. He preferred as a rule not to think unpleasant thoughts. Edward's mistress was a 10-year-old dark-haired girl named Abilene Tulane, who thought almost as highly of Edward as Edward thought of himself. Each morning after she dressed herself for school, Abilene dressed Edward. The china rabbit was in possession of an extraordinary wardrobe composed of handmade silk suits, custom shoes fashioned from the finest leather, and designed specifically for his rabbit feet, and a wide array of hats equipped with holes so that they could fit easily over Edward's large and expressive ears. Each pair of well-cut pants had a small pocket for Edward's gold pocket watch. Abilene wound his watch for him each morning. "Now, Edward," she said to him after she was done winding the watch, "when the big hand is on the 12 and the little hand is on the 3, I will come home to you." She placed Edward on a chair in the dining room and positioned the chair so that Edward was looking out the window and could see the path that led up to Tulane's front door. Abilene balanced the watch on his left leg. She kissed the tips of his ears, and then she left, and Edward spent the day staring out at Egypt Street, listening to the tick of his watch and waiting. Of all the seasons of the year, the rabbit most preferred winter, for the sun set early then, and the dining room windows became dark, and Edward could see his own reflection in the glass. And what a reflection it was! What an elegant figure he cut! Edward never ceased to be amazed at his own fineness. In the evening, Edward sat at the dining room table with the other members of the Tulane family, Abilene, her mother and father, and Abilene's grandmother, who was called Pellegrina. True, Edward's ears barely cleared the tabletop, and true also he spent the duration of the meal staring straight ahead at nothing but the bright and blinding white of the tablecloth. But he was there, a rabbit at the table. Abilene's parents found it charming that Abilene considered Edward real, and that she sometimes requested that a phrase or a story be repeated because Edward had not heard it. "Papa," Abilene would say, "I'm afraid that Edward didn't catch that last bit." Abilene's father would then turn in the direction of Edward's ears and speak slowly, repeating what he had just said for the benefit of the china rabbit. Edward pretended out of courtesy to Abilene to listen, but in truth he was not very interested in what people had to say. And also, he did not care for Abilene's parents and their condescending manner toward him. All adults, in fact, condescended to him. Only Abilene's grandmother spoke to him as Abilene did, as one equal to another. Pellegrina was very old. She had a large, sharp nose and bright black eyes that shone like dark stars. It was Pellegrina who was responsible for Edward's existence. It was she who had commissioned his making, she who had ordered his silk suits and his pocket watch, his jaunty hats and his bendable ears, his fine leather shoes and his jointed arms and legs, all from a master craftsman in his native France. It was Pellegrina who had given him a gift to Abilene on her 7th birthday. And it was Pellegrina who came each night to tuck Abilene into her bed and Edward into his. "Will you tell us a story, Pellegrina?" Abilene asked her grandmother each night. "Not tonight, lady," said Pellegrina. "When?" asked Abilene. "What night?" "Soon," said Pellegrina. "Soon there will be a story." And then she turned off the light, and Edward and Abilene lay in the dark of the bedroom. "I love you, Edward," Abilene said each night after Pellegrina had left. She said those words, and then she waited, almost as if she expected Edward to say something in return. Edward said nothing. He said nothing because of course he could not speak. He lay in his small bed next to Abilene's large one. He stared up at the ceiling and listened to the sound of her breath entering and leaving her body, knowing that soon she would be asleep. Because Edward's eyes were painted on and he could not close them, he was always awake. Sometimes, if Abilene put him into his bed on his side instead of on his back, he could see through the cracks in the curtains and out into the dark night. On clear nights the stars shone, and their pinprick light comforted Edward in a way that he could not understand. Often he stared at the stars all night until the dark finally gave way to dawn. Chapter 2. And in this manner Edward's days passed one into the other. Nothing remarkable happened. Oh, there was the occasional small domestic drama. Once, while Abilene was at school, the neighbor's dog, a male brindle boxer, inexplicably named Rosie, came into the house uninvited and unannounced, and lifted his leg on the dining room table, spraying the white tablecloth with urine. He then trotted over and sniffed Edward, and before Edward even had time to consider the implications of being sniffed by a dog, he was in Rosie's mouth, and Rosie was shaking him back and forth vigorously, growling and drooling. Fortunately, Abilene's mother walked past the dining room and witnessed Edward's suffering. "Drop it!" she shouted to Rosie, and Rosie, surprised into obedience, did as she was told. Edward's silk suit was stained with drool, and his head ached for several days afterward. But it was his ego that had suffered the most damage. Abilene's mother had referred to him as "it," and she was more outraged at the dog urine on her tablecloth than she was about the indignities that Edward had suffered at the jaws of Rosie. And then there was the time that a maid, new to the Tulane household and eager to impress her employers with her diligence, came upon Edward sitting on his chair in the dining room, "What's this bunny doing here?" she said out loud. Edward did not care at all for the word bunny. He found it derogatory in extreme. The maid bent over him and looked into his eyes. "Humph," she said. She stood back up. She put her hands on her hips. "I reckon you're just like every other thing in this house, something needing to be cleaned and dusted." And so the maid vacuumed Edward Tulane. She sucked each of his long ears up the vacuum cleaner hose. She pawed at his clothes and beat his tail. She dusted his face with brutality and efficiency. And in her zeal to clean him, she vacuumed Edward's gold pocket watch right off his lap. The watch went into the maw of the vacuum cleaner with a distressing clank that the maid did not even seem to hear. When she was done, she put the dining room chair back at the table, and uncertain about exactly where Edward belonged, she finally decided to shove him in among the dolls on a shelf in Abeline's bedroom. "That's right," said the maid. "There you go." She left Edward on the shelf at a most awkward and inhuman angle. His nose was actually touching his knees, and he waited there with the dolls twittering and giggling at him like a flock of demented and unfriendly birds until Abeline came home from school and found him missing and ran from room to room calling his name. "Edward!" she shouted. "Edward!" There was no way, of course, for him to let her know where he was, no way for him to answer. He could only sit and wait. When Abeline found him, she held him close, so close that Edward could feel her heart beating, leaping almost out of her chest in its agitation. "Edward," she said, "oh, Edward, I love you. I never want you to be away from me." The rabbit, too, was experiencing a great emotion, but it was not love. It was annoyance that he had been so mightily inconvenienced that he had been handled by the maid as cavalierly as an inanimate object, a serving bowl, say, or a teapot. The only satisfaction to be had from the whole affair was that the new maid was dismissed immediately. Edward's pocket watch was located later deep within the bowels of the vacuum cleaner, dented but still working condition. It was returned to him by Abeline's father, who presented it with a mocking bow. "Sir Edward," he said, "your timepiece, I believe." The Rosie affair and the vacuum cleaner incident, those were the great dramas of Edward's life, until the night of Abeline's 11th birthday, when, at the dinner table, as the cake was being served, the ship was mentioned. Chapter 3. "She is called the Queen Mary," said Abeline's father, "and you and your mamma and I shall sail on her all the way to London." "What about Pellegrina?" said Abeline. "I will not go," said Pellegrina. "I will stay." Edward, of course, was not listening. He found the talk around the dinner table excruciatingly dull. In fact, he made a point of not listening if he could help it. But then Abeline did something unusual, something that forced him to pay attention. As the talk about the ship continued, Abeline reached for Edward and took him from his chair and stood him on her lap. "And what about Edward?" she said, her voice high and uncertain. "What about him, darling?" said her mother. "Will Edward be sailing on the Queen Mary with us?" "Well, of course, if you wish, although you are getting a little old for such things as China rabbits." "Nonsense," said Abeline's father jovially. Who would protect Abeline if Edward was not there? From the vantage point of Abeline's lap, Edward could see the whole table spread out before him in a way that he never could when he was seated in his own chair. He looked upon the glittering array of silverware and glasses and plates. He saw the amused and condescending looks of Abeline's parents, and then his eyes met Pellegrina's. She was looking at him in a way a hawk hanging lazily in the air might study a mouse on the ground. Perhaps the rabbit fur on Edward's ears and tail and the whiskers on his nose had something of a dim memory of being hunted, for a shiver went through him. "Yes," said Pellegrina, without taking her eyes off of Edward. "Who would watch over Abeline if the rabbit were not there?"
Hi, middle school students. It's Mrs. Griffin. I think some of you, if you're in 5th and 6th grade, might remember me. I'm the principal over at George Miller. I'm so happy to be able to read for you and that we're doing this virtual read aloud. And since we can't be in this school to see you guys, I hope everyone's doing well. The end is almost near. I hope you read some great books this summer. I love reading and I'm excited to read this weekend. Anyway, today I'm going to read for you an excerpt from Dan Gutman's book, Let's Go to the Videotape. He is a very humorous author, and I hope that you find some elements that you can relate to in the story. So here we go. I wasn't the skinniest boy in Newark, New Jersey. Okay, well, maybe I was the skinniest boy in Newark, New Jersey. I have no proof either way. But kids at school used to say to me, "You're so skinny that when you go to the movies, you can't hold the seat down." Kids used to say, "Did you hear that Gutman disappeared?" Yeah, he turned sideways. Very funny. Nowadays, of course, everybody knows that it's good to be skinny for health reasons. But now that I'm pushing 50, I'm kind of glad that I've always been thin. But back in 1965, I was ashamed and humiliated that I could just about put my hand around my own ribs. My legs were like matchsticks. Clothing never fit me right. The waistband of my pants, for some reason, seemed to naturally fall just below my armpits. I wouldn't wear a watch because even the smallest wristband would slide up and down my arm. I was short, too. I can relate a little bit to what Dan Gutman is saying because when I was in elementary school and I went to St. Anthony's, I had to put rubber bands around my knee socks to hold them up because my legs were very thin. Anyway, let's continue. I was a mutant freak. I tried to gain weight. I really did. I heard that drinking milkshakes and eating bananas would make you bulk up. So I tried it. I didn't gain a pound. What can I say? I never had a big appetite. To this day, I eat a couple of bites of food and feel full. Finally, in 4th or 5th grade, I decided to do something about it. I decided to try weights. Not lifting them, mind you. That would have been too much work. I'm talking about putting weights in my shoes. You see, my father had a printing business that he ran out of our basement. He had all these thin pieces of lead that he used to separate the lines of type. One day each year at school, each class would be marched down to the nurse's office for the annual ritual of being weighed, measured, and in my case, humiliated. It was no fun being the skinniest and shortest boy in school. So I hit on a great idea. I would borrow some of my dad's lead weights, and slip them into my shoes to make myself heavier and taller. Nobody would know the difference. No, they didn't. The lead added maybe 1 pound to my weight and half an inch to my height. Not a big deal at all, is it? The kids still laughed at me, and it was hard to walk with all that lead in my shoes. The worst part of school for me, naturally, was gym class. I was never good at sports. I didn't have the arm strength to climb the ropes in gym. I didn't have the endurance to run the mile. Baseball was always my favorite sport, but I couldn't hit the ball. I was always afraid the ball was going to hit me. It never did, but once I ran into a tree while chasing a frisbee. The gym teacher at Mount Vernon School was Mr. Feely. Yep, that was his real name. He made us play basketball a lot. When things got rough, I was always the one on the floor, getting trampled by the other players. This poor guy, huh? The worst possible words out of Mr. Feely, to me anyway, were, "Okay, boys, shirts and skins." The skins team, of course, had to take their shirts off. At least with a shirt on, I didn't look too much like a walking skeleton. I would pray, "Please put me on the shirt team. Please put me on the shirt team." "Gutman!" Mr. Feely would always bellow. "You're a skin!" But usually the game we played in gym was kickball. I liked kickball, mostly because nobody had to take his shirt off to play it. There were about a dozen boys on each team, and the fielders would scatter across the big gym, kind of like you guys used to do on the playground in 2nd grade when you played kickball out on the blacktop. Little guys like me would try to hit dribblers past the infield and scoot to first base before the ball got there. Big guys could bang the ball as far as they could and bounce it off the far wall. There was one game I will never forget as long as I live. My team was at bat. We sat in a line on the side waiting our turn to kick. Edmund Fortuna was sitting next to me. He turned to me and said, "Hey, Gutman, do you realize you're the only guy on the team who isn't wearing cons?" Cons were Converse All-Stars, those canvas sneakers that were state-of-the-art in the 60s. This was before Nike and Adidas came along. I looked down the line, and Edmund was right. Every single kid, except for me, was wearing cons. I had cheap, no-name sneakers. Suddenly, I felt ashamed of my stupid sneakers. It was my turn to kick, and I was mad. I decided that instead of trying for my usual cheap single, I would just whack the ball with everything I had. And that's what I did. The ball took off and sailed across the gym, straight as an arrow. I headed for first, keeping my eye on the ball to see where it would land. It looked like it had a chance to reach the far wall, or at least the basketball backboard that was attached to the wall. If it bounced off the backboard, that would make it doubly hard to catch. The ball was on a downward trajectory when I reached first. Kids had positioned themselves under the backboard in case the ball didn't reach it. And that's when it happened. The ball went through the hoop. Swish! Nothing but net. I had kicked a basket all the way across the gym. Everybody stopped. It was like the day the earth stood still. Nobody had ever kicked a basket before. We didn't know what to do. "Home run," Mr. Feely announced. "That's 1,000 runs." I circled the bases triumphantly. Then I sat back down next to Edmund Fortuna. "Let's see you and your cons do that," I said. When we got back to class, everybody was talking about what happened in gym class. "Gutman kicked a basket! Gutman kicked a basket!" As the girls heard the news, they were looking at me with new respect. I was working hard to act like it was no big deal. This incident happened nearly 40 years ago, but I remember it like it was 5 minutes ago. I'm sure that none of the other guys who were there that day remember it at all. It was only important to me. It would be nice to say that this was the beginning of my incredible athletic career, the turning point where I went from being a skinny little geek who couldn't play sports into a real jock. Stories are supposed to have happy endings, right? Well, forget it. I'm still a skinny little geek who can't play sports. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night before I fall asleep, I roll this mental videotape I have of the time I kicked a basket in gym class. In my mind, I watch myself kick that basket over and over again. I'll bet every kid has at least one of those moments in his life when he did something really, really great, something really unexpected. Close your eyes and think of that moment from time to time. Remember it just the way it happened. Never let that video fade away. Someday, 40 years from now, you'll be lying in bed at night. You might want to replay it. The end. So our author here, Dan Gutman, is from Newark, New Jersey, just down the road here. And his random fact is that he thinks baseball is better than any other sport because it's the most complex. Well, I have to say I disagree with that because I think lacrosse is the best sport. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I hope you have a moment already. And if you don't, then maybe one day soon it will happen for you where you're going to have an incredible, unforgettable moment. Stay healthy, stay happy, be well.
Hi, middle school students. This is Ms. Leahy, the assistant principal at Miller Elementary. I'm thrilled to be able to share this story with you today. I'm reading from The Crossover, written by Kwame Alexander. This was actually a Newbery Award winner, and it's an emotional story about two twin boys who are playing basketball with their dad, who is a former NBA player. And it's unique because it's written in verse. After dinner, Dad takes us to the rec to practice shooting free throws with one hand while he stands 2 feet in front of us, waving frantically in our faces. "It will teach you focus," he reminds us. 3 players from the local college recognize Dad and ask him for autographs for our parents. Dad chuckles along with them. JB ignores them. I challenge them. It won't be so funny when we shut you amateurs down, will it? I say. Oh, this young boy got hops like his old man, the tallest one says. Talk is cheap, Dad says. If you all want to run, let's do this. First one to 11. The tall one asks Dad if he needs crutches. Then checks the ball to me and the game begins. Right after JB screams, loser pays $20. After we win, I see the pink Reeboks wearing girl shooting baskets on the other court. She plays ball too. JB walks over to her and I can tell he likes her because when she goes in for a layup, he doesn't slap the ball silly like he tries to do with me. He just stands there looking silly, smiling on the other court at the pink Reeboks wearing girl. Dad takes us to Krispy Kreme and tells us his favorite story again. Didn't Mom say no more donuts? JB asks Dad. What your mother doesn't know won't hurt her, he answers, biting into his third chocolate glazed cruller. Good shooting today. We beat those boys like they stole something, he adds. Why didn't we take their money, Dad? I ask. They were kids, filthy just like y'all. The look on their faces after we beat them, 11-0, was enough for me. Remember when you were two and I taught you the game? You had a bottle in one hand and a ball in the other, and your mom thought I was crazy. I was crazy in love with my twin boys. Once, when you were 3, I took you to the park to shoot free throws. The guy who worked there said, "This basket is 10 feet tall for older kids. Kids like yours might as well shoot at the sun." And then he laughed. And I asked him if a deaf person could write music. And he said, "Huh?" Then took out his wrench and told me, "I'm going to lower the goal for y'all." We remember Dad. And then you told us Beethoven was a famous musician who was deaf. And how many times do we have to hear the same? And Dad interrupts me. Interrupt me again, and I'll start over. Like I was saying, I handed you both the ball, stood you between the foul line and the rim, and told you to shoot. You did, and it was musical, like the opening of Beethoven's Fifth. Da, 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 da. Your shots whistled like a train pulling into the station. I expected you to make it, and you did. The guy was in shock. He looked at me like he'd missed the train. Basketball rule number 3. Never let anyone lower your goals. Others' expectations of you are determined by their limitations of life. The sky is your limit, sons. Always shoot for the sun, and you will shine.
Good morning, MacArthur Barr Middle School. My name is Sue Frisch. Some of you may know me from a first or second grade teacher at George Miller School, but now I'm on the Nanuet School Board. They've asked us to read or talk about some inspirational book or story that we thought you might enjoy. My expertise is not middle school literature, but I have come up with something, or someone rather, that I think that you might find very inspirational. I know I do. The name of the book that I'm reading some excerpts from is I Am Malala. I'm starting with a piece from the prologue, which is all the way at the beginning of the story. It starts with, 1 year ago, I left my home for school and never returned. I was shot by a Taliban bullet and was flown out of Pakistan unconscious. Some people say I will never return home, but I believe firmly in my heart that I will. To be torn from the country that you love is not something to wish on anyone. The day when everything changed was Tuesday, October 9th, 2012. That morning, we arrived in our usual procession of brightly colored rickshaws. The school had been founded by my father before I was born. We went to school 6 mornings a week, and as a 15-year-old, I was in year 9. Outside the door to the school lay not only the noise of the main street, but also those like the Taliban who think girls should not go to school. I started taking the bus because my mother was scared of me walking on my own. We had been getting threats all year. It's hard for girls in our society to be anything other than teachers or doctors, if they can work at all. I was different. I never hid my desire when I changed from wanting to be a doctor to wanting to be an inventor or a politician. She ends her prologue with, "Who is Malala?" And you'll understand why if you read the book. I am Malala, and this is my story. There's one other piece I wanted to read to you quickly. At school, there was a competition. When we got the topic, a writing competition, when we got the topic, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was, "Honesty is the best policy." There was an older girl at school who was a very good speaker. She was beautiful and spoke in an animated way. She could speak confidently in front of hundreds of people that would hang on her every word. When it was time for the competition, my father wrote my speech. When the judges announced the results at the end, my friend had won. I came in second. It didn't matter. I realized that sometimes it's better to tell your own story. From then on, I started writing my own speeches and changing the way I delivered them from my heart rather than from a sheet of paper. The story ends with an epilogue. It says, "I love my God. I talk to him all day. By giving me this height to reach people, he has also given me great responsibilities. Peace in every home, every street, every village, every country. This is my dream. Education for every boy and every girl in the world. To sit down in a chair and read my books with my friends at school is my right. To see each and every human being with a smile of happiness is my wish. I am Malala. My world has changed, but I have not." So your world has changed recently, hasn't it? But you haven't changed. We can't wait to see you back. I wish you well. Stay home. We love you.